If you grew up watching Everybody Hates Chris, you probably felt like you were stepping right into 1980s Brooklyn, following a young Chris as he struggled to survive middle school, deal with his loud but loving family, and avoid the daily dangers of his neighborhood. The show had an almost autobiographical feel, narrated by an older Chris Rock, making it seem like we were watching a reenactment of his real childhood. But here's the million-dollar question. How much of the show was actually true? Was Chris really bullied that badly? Was Julius, his father, really that cheap? Did Greg, his nerdy best friend, actually exist? And what about Tonya? Did he really have an annoying little sister like her? Well, let's just say the truth behind the show is even more shocking, sad, and mind-blowing than you might think. Chris Rock's real-life family versus TV family. The big differences. One of the first things fans notice when they dig into Chris Rock's real life is that his family on the show was smaller than in reality. On Everybody Hates Chris, Chris has two siblings, Drew, his cooler, taller younger brother, and Tonya, his sassy little sister. But here's where it gets wild. In real life, Chris Rock was the oldest of 7 kids. That's right, 7. So why did the show only give him 2 siblings? Well, there are a few reasons. First, from a storytelling perspective, managing 7 different siblings would have been absolute chaos. A sitcom needs focus, and the best way to keep things interesting was to cut it down to 2 key sibling dynamics, one older brother figure, Drew, and one younger sister, Tonya. However, there's something else. Tonya? She never even existed. Chris Rock did have younger sisters, but none of them were exactly like Tonya. The character was completely made up for the show. In reality, Chris mostly grew up with brothers, and his real-life younger brother Tony Rock has even spoken about how strange it was seeing a sister on TV who wasn't real. And then there's Drew. On the show, Drew is taller, cooler, and more athletic than Chris. He's the guy everyone likes, the one who always gets the girls. The joke is that even though Chris is the older brother, Drew overshadows himself in comedy. He never got to see Everybody Hates Chris, never got to watch his son become a superstar, and never knew that he would be immortalized in a hit TV show. Chris Rock has said that the version of Julius we see on the show is pretty accurate. He really was that cheap, and he really did work himself to exhaustion to provide for his family. But in reality, his death had a profound impact on Chris Rock, shaping his comedy and his outlook on life. Rochelle Rock. I ain't raising no dumb kids. Chris Rock's real mother, Rose Rock, is just as fierce and independent as her TV counterpart, Rochelle, played by Tichina Arnold. In the show, Rochelle is the classic strict black mom, never afraid to yell at her kids, quit her job on a whim, or remind everyone that she doesn't need this job because her husband has 2 of them. But here's something interesting. Chris Rock's real mom never quit her job. That whole joke about Rochelle constantly quitting because Julius had 2 jobs, completely made up for comedic effect. In reality, Rose Rock was a dedicated educator and worked for years as a teacher and social worker. Even after Chris Rock became famous, she continued to advocate for better education for black students. She was a tough mother, just like on the show, but she never quit her job just because her husband had multiple incomes. That was purely for laughs. Greg, did he even exist? Greg is one of the most important characters in Everybody Hates Chris. He's Chris's nerdy, awkward, yet loyal best friend, the one person Chris can count on in school. But here's the shocking truth. Greg never existed. Chris Rock has admitted in multiple interviews that he didn't have a best friend like Greg growing up. In reality, he was often completely alone at his predominantly white school. The character of Greg was added to the show because, let's face it, it's hard to write a comedy where the main character has no one to talk to. However, the loneliness Chris felt at school, that part was real. Chris Rock's school years. The dark reality. One of the most accurate and painful parts of Everybody Hates Chris is how terribly Chris was treated at school. On the show, Chris attends Corleone Junior High, where he is the only black student and constantly bullied. He's called names, beaten up, and singled out by racist teachers who blame him for everything. This was very real. In real life, Chris Rock went to James Madison High School in Brooklyn, which was predominantly white. He has said in interviews that he was bullied relentlessly, not just by students, but even by teachers. He was constantly picked on because of his race, and things got so bad that his parents eventually pulled him out of the school. Here's the craziest part. Years later, Chris Rock tracked down one of his old bullies. He wanted to see what had happened to the kids who made his life miserable. And guess what? The guy had been in and out of prison. Chris Rock has said that experiencing this level of bullying actually helped shape his comedy. Instead of trying to fight back physically, he developed his sharp wit as a defense mechanism. Humor became his weapon, and that's what eventually made him successful. We've already uncovered some shocking truths about Everybody Hates Chris. From the fact that Chris Rock actually had 7 siblings, not just Drew and Tonya, to the heartbreaking reality that his father, Julius Rock, never lived to see his success. But there's even more to this story. As we continue peeling back the layers, we'll explore even deeper questions. Why did the show end when it did? How does the final episode mirror Chris Rock's actual life? And impressed that he took him under his wing. He even got Rock his first big break, a small role in Beverly Hills Cop 2. The final episode of Everybody Hates Chris is meant to symbolize that moment, Chris leaving behind his difficult childhood and stepping into the unknown, where his fate would soon change forever. So why didn't the show continue past this point? Because it had reached the point where Chris Rock's life stopped being about struggle and started being about success. And at that moment, Everybody Hates Chris was no longer a show about a kid trying to survive. It was the beginning of a superstar's journey. Das Satire, How Everybody Hates Chris, became a cultural landmark. The show didn't just tell the story of Chris Rock's childhood, it resonated with millions of people who saw themselves in Chris's struggles. It was one of the only sitcoms to honestly portray what life was like for a black family in the 1980s. Balancing comedy with harsh realities like racism, poverty, and bullying. And it wasn't just black audiences who connected with it. Chris Rock has said in interviews that many immigrants, working-class families, and kids who felt like outsiders have reached out to him, saying they related deeply to his experiences. The show became bigger than just his personal story. It became a universal tale about growing up as an underdog. And here's a wild fact, the show was way more popular after it ended. Thanks to streaming platforms, Everybody Hates Chris gained an even bigger fan base in the 2010s and beyond. Many people who never watched it when it originally aired discovered it years later, proving that its story was truly timeless. The hidden details in Everybody Hates Chris that most fans missed. If you've watched the show multiple times, you may have noticed some small details that reveal even more about Chris Rock's real life. 1. Chris Rock's real-life photos appear in the show. If you look closely in certain episodes, you'll see real childhood pictures of Chris Rock in the background of the sets, especially in the Rock family's home. It's a subtle way the creators honored the true story behind the show. 2. The names of Chris's schools were changed, but the racism was real. Chris's school in the show, Corleone Junior High, is fictional, but it was based on James Madison High School, where Chris Rock actually went and experienced extreme bullying. The name Corleone, a reference to The Godfather, was likely chosen to emphasize the gangster feel of the tough Brooklyn environment. 3. The show references real events. From the 1980s, because the show is set in the early 80s, there are real-world references hidden throughout. News clips of Ronald Reagan, mentions of Michael Jackson's rise to fame, and even nods to the growing hip-hop culture of that era. Why Everybody Hates Chris still matters today. Even though the show ended in 2009, its themes are still shockingly relevant today. Bullying Chris Rock's real-life experience of being bullied is something many kids, and even adults, can relate to. The way he used humor as a survival mechanism is still a lesson for anyone facing tough situations. Racism in schools. The idea of being the only black student in a predominantly white school and facing discrimination. Unfortunately, that's still a reality for many students today. hard-working parents. Julius and Rochelle's struggles to provide for their family represent what so many working-class parents go through every day. This is why Everybody Hates Chris remains one of the most important sitcoms ever made, because it wasn't just funny, it was real. So what happened to the real people behind the show? Chris Rock became one of the most famous comedians in the world, starring in movies, hosting the Oscars, and even winning Emmys for his comedy specials. Tony Rock, Drew's real-life counterpart, also became a comedian following in his brother's footsteps. However, he has said in interviews that he wasn't too thrilled about being portrayed as the cool younger brother on TV. Terry Crews, Julius Rock, went on to become a Hollywood star, starring in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, action movies, and even hosting America's Got Talent. Tichina Arnold, Rochelle Rock, continued to have a successful acting career, starring in shows like Survivor's Remorse and The Neighborhood. And as for Everybody Hates Chris itself, well, there's one last surprise. A reboot is coming, with a major twist. Yes, you read that right. A reboot of Everybody Hates Chris is officially in development. But here's the twist. It won't be a live-action sitcom, it's going to be an animated series. Chris Rock will still be involved as the narrator, but this time, the story will be told in cartoon form, giving it a fresh new look while still keeping its classic humor. This reboot proves just how much impact Everybody Hates Chris still has, even years after it ended. Final thoughts. How Everybody Hates Chris changed television forever. When Everybody Hates Chris first aired, many people saw it as just another sitcom, but over time it has moments. It gave us one of the most accurate portrayals of growing up as an underdog, from dealing with bullies to navigating family life in a working-class home. It tackled racism, poverty, and resilience, all while keeping us laughing with some of the sharpest writing in TV history. Even though the show ended in 2009, its impact never faded. Instead, it became a cult classic, inspiring new generations of fans who still see themselves in Chris's journey. And with the upcoming animated reboot, the legacy of Everybody Hates Chris will live on, proving once again that sometimes the toughest experiences make for the best stories. Chris Rock's life may have started with everybody hating Chris, but by the end, everybody loved him. And that's the real story behind Everybody Hates Chris.
Can we get these?
No, we named the soap. Instead of Zest, Dial, or Coast, we got...
Camay?
Do you have a problem with that?
Bring it up.
My mother could save money a lot of places, but not on her ass.
I don't think you're supposed to have your feet on the table.
Ain't nobody ask you.
Young man, I'm gonna have to ask you to take your feet off the table.
What if I don't feel like it?
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
What if I don't feel like doing that either?
You're with the Employee of the Month, aren't you?
What is going on over there?
Is that Chris?
Chris!
What?
Hey, baby.
Ma?
How's everything going in here?
Doctor, is he gonna be okay?
Well, I think we'll be able to get it out, but you won't be able to wear that shoe again. Hang in there, big guy.
Any available IV nurse 609?
How you feeling, sweetie?
Not too good.
Well, why were you acting like that?
Trying to press Tasha.
You acting like an idiot?
No, she said she liked bad boys like Slave or Slave. Trying to act like him.
Baby, you can only be who you are. If she doesn't want you, then you don't want her.
That day I learned the most important lesson in life. Be yourself, or get a pump in your ass.
Mommy's gonna get you some ice chips, okay?
Better get a shoe on, too.
Hey, Chris.
Tasha?
Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'll be fine. I just wanted to apologize for acting like such an idiot. Forgive me?
Yeah, it's okay. That's a friend.
Why are you moving furniture?
Because Daddy's giving me pink carpet.
Drew, where'd you get that suit?
Mama bought it for me.
That's $63.72 worth of suit. Rochelle!
I told Tanya she couldn't have pink carpet. Why would you say yes when I said no?
I didn't know she asked you first why you spent money on a suit for Drew after I told him no.
I'm not gonna have my baby on stage looking like he can't sing.
Well, I'm not gonna have my baby walking around acting like she can't have pink carpet on the floor.
You know what? Fine.
Fine.
Fine. Wait. Tanya, why are you moving furniture?
Because Daddy's giving me pink carpet.
Julius!
Drew, where'd you get that suit?
Mama bought it for me.
That's $63.72 worth of suit. Rochelle!
I told Tanya she couldn't have pink carpet. Why would you say yes when I said no?
I didn't know she asked you first why you spent money on a suit for Drew after I told him no.
I'm not gonna have my baby on stage looking like he can't sing.
Well, I'm not gonna have my baby walking around acting like she can't have pink carpet on
Clear
the...
off the table and do the dishes.
No, I didn't eat all the dinner by myself. I shouldn't have to clean it all up by myself.
I don't wear all the clothes, but I wash them by myself. I don't sleep in all the beds in this house, but I make them up by myself. I don't pee in all of the toilets in this house by myself.
Ma, Drew and Tanya sitting right there doing nothing. Why can't they help?
Because I told you to do it. Now I don't want to hear no more back talk. Now clean this mess up.
No, I'm not gonna do it.
Now are you gonna clean up this table? Or do I need to tell your father?
Go ahead. Tell him. I don't care.
Fine. So I thought you talked to him.
I did, and he's got a point.
What?
Why should Drew and Tanya watch TV while Chris cleans up their mess?
I do not have to explain to him why I do the things that I do. If I want him to do something that I don't want the other kids to do, I probably have a good reason.
And do you have a good reason?
No.
He's growing up, Rochelle. If you ask him to do something that seems unfair, he's gonna want to know why. You wanted a strong-minded kid, well, you got one.